Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. I'm your host, Ross Stockdale, here to bring you another valuable brainstorm to enhance your life, liberty, pursuit of property. This season is all about living the EOS life. So we're talking to people that bleed orange and black, the EOS community. Charlie Rhea. Charlie, how you doing? What's going on in your world today?
Yeah, I'm feeling fantastic. First of all, Ross, thank you for having me on the show and shout out to Brian, our connector. I'm doing great. I got three young kids, so life is super busy for us, but here to show up and add value and hopefully provide some helpful information for those listening.
We talked a bit off camera about fatherhood.
Yeah.
What has life been like from from pre-children to now, and how have you reassessed your scheduling and time management to fit in all the business that you conduct?
That's a loaded question. It's funny because you feel like in college, you're like, I'm so busy with all my classes and stuff. I played college athletics. So I was very busy. But when I look at it, I was like, really wasn't that busy. And then you lead to like your singles in your 20s and you're just like trying to grind and make it with your job. And you still feel like you're so busy. You have no time. And then you get married and you start having those young kids and you realize you just laugh at yourself. I was not busy at all. I had so much free time. Like the thing that being a father, it's so amazing. It's all about being present and being intentional. In my opinion, that's kind of what I focus on. And being patient, okay, most recently with potty training and things like that. But what it forces you to have to do is you have to be very, very strategic. And so what a time such as this for EOS to come in and for the foundation of focus, discipline, and execution, even more so for myself running a level 10 meeting so that I can be present. When it hits 6 o'clock, I can show up and be present, involved in my three kids' lives. And don't forget about your spouse. You got to be there for them too. So, all that to say, what it has forced me to do is prioritize. You cannot do it all. So
You
what's your highest
definitely
priority, right?
you
What's your highest
definitely can't
priority?
do it all. That's
Yeah,
that's that's the truth.
yeah,
EOS is a system to maximize human energy, and I
that's
think
right.
that every
Yeah,
parent would love a system to maximize the human energy of their household that didn't rely on just chugging coffee through sleepless nights of
yeah,
rearing young children.
I know. Yeah, you're right there with me on the journey. It's so fun, and at the same time, like we have to be super careful to protect our focus. And I think that's what I've learned being in the young fatherhood is like if I don't get up early and get time, reading the Bible, connecting with God, doing a clarity break, just like physically doing some exercise, like all of that personal time, it goes away. It just doesn't happen because then it's nonstop family time or nonstop, trying to generate new clients. And then it's family time again, and then you're exhausted. So protecting that morning routine is another huge piece. I knew that was important before being a father, but fatherhood really exposes that if you don't get it in, it's not happening.
You have to be intentional. I want to say the one of the more recent additions to the EOS reading curriculum, People. I think Mark O'Donnell may have been the author, and I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
Yep.
um, Talks about setting culture, right? And how important is it to set a culture in an organization, but it starts with your at home life too.
Hmm.
And it's being intentional so that you don't, either have a command and control or some chaotic, just not intentional, not healthy, which we're present dads. That's not the goal. But then, happy accidents where it's like, hey, it might be good, but you're not doing it on purpose. What are some of the
Yeah.
things that you intentionally try to set to make sure the culture at home and then the culture in the session room are both, high health and highly intentional?
Yeah. The thing with the home presence is it kind of goes back to like establishing the meeting pulse, right? Which we teach our clients in EOS. And for me and my family, that meeting pulse looks like connecting with my wife every Sunday before the week starts. And it's kind of like a same page meeting. And essentially, we're connecting around the calendar, checking in on each other's feelings. We get to pray for each other and just see how each other are doing. And it's a time to do that away from the kids. We really focus on ourselves. And that is, essentially, like I said, the same page meeting that sets the tone for the rest of the week. So we're on the same page. And in the same manner, the two rhythms for me, the two touch points with the kids is morning time and then that bedtime. It's the two times that you can go into their room and they're, I don't know if your daughter's like this, but they're just so snuggly and cuddly in the morning, and you can just go in there and you can really just love on them. You can speak positive truth, and you can really connect with them and see how they're doing and feeling. And then at the end of the day, you're helping them process their emotions. They don't know how to regulate their emotions, right? So you're modeling how you regulate your emotions, and you're asking them questions and intentionally connecting. So from a personal family standpoint, that's kind of the rhythms that I've kind of set up with our family. And then from a EOS session room, the most important thing, in my opinion, for an EOS implementer, we see ourselves as teachers, facilitators, coaches. So how can you maximize being a teacher, facilitator, coach? You have to have your mindset and you have to be really clear. So basically what I started doing is actually developing a prep routine 2 hours before the session. I'll spend about 30 minutes preparing my mindset, preparing my mindset with a positive self-talk, looking at previous notes from the session that I had last time with this particular client. I'll do a little bit of spiritual mindset. So that's worth me connecting with the Lord, reading the Bible, maybe even praying over my client as a Christian, and just really trying to get grounded and focused on how can I show up open, honest, willing to be vulnerable, and for me to be present because it's not about me. I'm here to actually point them. The answer is in the room, right? The tools are where I'm trying to point them toward the tools. And 9 out of 10 times they know where they want to go. There's 1 out of 10 times I'll kind of give them a little help, but generally, instead of me being the consultant telling them, I'm more of a coach drawing out where they want to go. And then the third piece is prepare the room. And that's where I'm either preparing it virtually if it's a virtual client, making sure all my tech is up to date, like you and I were talking about before this. Or if it's a physical room, I'm literally visualizing where am I going to do the accountability chart? Where's the issues list going to go? Where is this going to go? How am I going to position them in such a way where it's maximized facilitation? I'm not in the room, I'm invisible. That's what I want to look at. I'm like a sounding board, I'm just invisible. And I'm every once in a while asking a question, drawing out, hey, what is it that you want to do? So that's kind of my prep routine. It's 2 hours. I do 30 minutes on each of those, and then I give myself 30 minutes of margin. So in total, it's about 2 hours.
Some of the things you said, incredibly interesting. So I have a background in athletics. So when I went to college, it was to play, it was essentially I went to the school that I thought would have the best impact for my athletic career.
What sport?
I was a wrestler.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. So I wrestling was my main focus. I played football and rugby and other contact sports. When I was a kid, did karate,
Yeah,
and then was became a huge UFC fan around the time I went to school.
yeah.
And
Oh, so you're all about that mindset training. Yeah, that's
oh,
huge.
Enter the Danger is like one of my favorite things to
Yeah,
do for sport.
yeah,
And so then after school, got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then MMA and cage fighting. So one of the things that was just incredibly important through being on so many different teams and scenarios where people think that it's an individual sport with fighting, but I think it's more of a team sport than anything, is the
yeah.
importance of having a coach. I
Mm,
understand you have a background in athletic training and coaching because
yeah,
the way that you structure your time and the way that you structure your sessions and the prep
yeah.
makes me just see like exactly how I could perceive you as a coach.
Yeah,
What were you like growing up? Were you all about athletics? Were you like what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you always want to be a coach? And then how did that career start and transform?
yeah, man. No, love athletics. So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and just was involved in every sport possible and just absolutely loved it, right? In fact, I actually navigated away from watching sports because it just would make me want to go out there and play them. So I get excited by doing an activity. And the thing about it was the game day was always fun, but what I enjoyed the most, Ross, was the training. And I actually enjoyed the
Mm.
practice and I enjoyed the process. And so it's so funny because that led me into how can I get a competitive advantage? How can I train my mindset and get my skill set and ultimately physically develop my body in such a way where I can have the best, highest advantage to dominate on, when game time shows up. Game time was like nothing because I worked so hard in the practice field. So doing all of that and being involved in so many sports, I started to develop a holistic view of how the body works and got into 10 years of doing strength and conditioning. So one of my most famous places I worked at was the University of Alabama during their glory years in the 2015, 2016. And being there, it really showed me what high level, high performance, cream of the crop performance looks like in terms of team development. And so the holistic development of how do you train your body to have the highest performance. It's the same thing with business leaders. They want to win. They want to come together and work together and they need help, right? Being held accountable. They need help with their vision. They need help with clarity. So it's so funny that I feel like for 10 years I was getting trained on how to work with teams and I had seen it on myself, the advantages, right? If you work hard and smart, not just working hard, working smarter, there's a huge benefit to game day. Well, the level 10 meeting, which I know I mentioned that earlier, that is game day. And so if you can prepare really, really locked in with your leadership team and you show up to Monday morning or whatever the day is that you do your level 10 meeting, that's game day. You show up. It's the most important meeting every single week and it gets you focused. But here's the key. It's easy to get focused. It's hard to stay focused. It is the discipline that keeps you focused throughout the rest of the week and ultimately throughout the rest of the 90-day world. So, yeah, I just feel like 10 years of strength and conditioning and athletic performance and helping these high performance athletes has transitioned so smoothly into the motivation, intensity, and intentional focus on how do you win as a team, right? I love teams, and that's why I'm doing this. I work with teams.
It's interesting to hear the approach. It's not like you only did football, right? It's not like
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
oh, I play football all year round. No, you said you played every single sport that you've trained for, for anything, right? For any game. You
yeah,
didn't mention one specific one. When people
yeah,
talk to EOS implementers, they may be shocked when they hear who your core focus, your ideal client would be. It's not just, oh, we don't just help roofing companies. We don't
yeah,
just help home service companies or whatever. You help businesses that are growth minded with a desire to make it well, obviously you have to have a desire to grow, but you also want to
yeah,
make an impact. You have a certain size of a team, industry agnostic, core values, et cetera, et cetera. But that could be any sport, that could be any
yeah.
industry,
It's true.
and that universal applicability to strength training for whatever that athlete go doesn't matter the athlete specifically, sure, but then the sport specifically, that's a unique way that I think that some people listening, whether they want to learn more about EOS or more about like the coaching space, if you don't have that breadth of experience, it's hard to say these are the universal truths that apply across both sports and industries.
Hmm.
um, Other thing you mentioned several times is your relationship with God, your faith.
Yeah.
How were you always that way? Did you develop it later? And like, what does that look like? And how do you incorporate that into your core values and your day to day, like your processes and time?
Yeah. My relationship with God is near and dear to my heart. It just, I first and foremost am a follower of Christ. And so like that's my rally cry and that is my focus. I believe that we are here to love God and to love others. And so to truly connect for me with God, it was something that was taught to me by my parents and growing up in the church environment, it was, I heard a lot about it, but at some point the buck stops with you. You have to take ownership and make it your own. And so, middle school, high school, I started to read the Bible, and the Bible got a hold of me. God ultimately, in His Word, got a hold of me. Another huge thing in part of that journey, Ross, is mentors. Okay,
Mm.
I was
Hmm.
always just so blessed to have at least one mentor and a discipleship group. So it's so interesting. Our head guy of EOS Worldwide, Mark O'Donnell, he talks about you need three things in order to scale your business, right? In order to grow. You need a business operating system, EOS, you need a coach, and you need a peer advisory group. When I look back at my journey in my Christian walk and even in my leadership growth, I always had those. I always felt like I had this operating system of how to view life through a biblical lens I had my connection through God, and He brought specific people, not only my dad and my mom, who were really solid believers, but mentors, coaches. Think about a coach, a sport coach, teacher, everybody, even those listening. You can think of one coach or a teacher who had a positive, meaningful, lasting impact in your life. I was always surrounded by that. And then I had a group of band of brothers, right? People, iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. We're here together. We're in the foxhole together. And I look back at my journey, and the reason I had growth and was able to really excel in different areas of leadership and personal growth, and even now in marriage, is because I'm surrounding myself with people that are a little bit further ahead of me in the journey, right? And so one of the core values for us at EOS is humbly confident. And you have to establish confidence. Confidence comes through being prepared. But there's that humility side. It's not just confident, arrogant, you're arrogantly confident or pride. It's you're humble. And a great definition of humility is it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And so that's really what it comes down to is like, okay, how do you balance those two of being confident? We want to show up prepared and masterfully excellent in what we do. Also, there's a humility, a willingness to be open and honest, to grow, to be able to hear some feedback that might be kind of hard to hear, but at the same time you're saying, okay, I want to grow, right? When you think you've made it, you've actually stopped growing. You've limited your growth. And so that's I know that's kind of going on a tangent here, but I really think all of this comes back to setting aside time to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with positive people that can have a positive impact in your life. And really, it looks like having those mentors and that peer group.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, you mentioned being around winning team for football with Alabama.
Yeah.
Up north here, I'm from Pennsylvania. The I would just stand on this argument. The strongest or the most impressive wrestling franchise to date is through Penn State. Cael Sanderson, the head coach, would be, I would say, the de facto reason for that. And I was lucky enough to have friends, grew up in Pennsylvania, a big
Yeah.
wrestling state, that went on to wrestle for him. And the
Wow.
transformation from preseason to after the first season, my buddy would come
Yeah.
home and like, you're a different person. He's like,
Wow.
yeah, my values are completely changed. And Kale would coach in such a way that would be um, the idea of humility. I want to share, my
Yeah.
definition is quite close to yours. But I think it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking more of others. So
Mm.
similar,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Very similar.
But
Yes.
like thinking more of God, thinking more of your team, thinking more of your parents, thinking more of your classmates, your teachers, your coaches, and less about, yourself. And what that helps the athletes, specifically in Penn State, to do is focus, like you said before, on the process, showing up every day. Did you do can you look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I did everything I could to be the best person I could be, whether that's, the student, the athlete,
Mm.
well prepared physically, mentally, spiritually. And if the answer is yes, don't worry about the result. That's in God's hands.
Yeah.
And also each day with gratitude, right? You're blessed to have the opportunity. You're
Yeah.
blessed to be
Oh,
able to compete. There's people out there, prayers go out to a wrestler, Ben Askren, who one of the more successful club coaches in wrestling in the country just got diagnosed with, I think, a staph infection and pneumonia is in critical condition. And it's
oh,
just like you never know when lightning can strike. So be thankful when you're healthy, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So I want to share that story. I think it's super important to have real examples of when you witness greatness and like success leaves clues. And I
Mm.
think what you were talking about is right in line with like other athletic, dynasties and the clues that they left behind. Something else that you've said is surrounding yourself with mentors and with
Yeah.
peers and making sure
Yep.
that you're right, you're with the right people, not just that you're in the right seat, you individually, Charlie, but that the people in the organization are the right people.
Yeah.
um, how do you look at the accountability chart as if you're managing, from a coaching perspective, both EOS and with athletics? And what can some athletic coaches learn from how EOS does RPRS and accountability chart and, delegate and elevate those types of things? I want to hear
Yeah.
your take on that analogy.
Yeah. Well, one of the sayings at EOS is, as goes the leadership team, so goes the company.
Hmm.
Okay. And I actually like to take it a step further and say, as goes the visionary and the integrator, so goes the leadership team. because they are the leadership team of the leadership team, right? And so what we're talking about here, John Maxwell talks about leaders of leaders. It's level 4 leadership in his 5 levels of leadership book. And it's a phenomenal concept, but really what this comes down to is the accountability chart is an opportunity to create true ownership and autonomy for your leaders because you're doing it with the 3 phases. So phase 1 is you're setting the function. Phase 2, you're looking at the roles and responsibilities. And then phase 3 is then you put the people in the seats. And that's when you're using do they GWC. For those that don't know that, that's do they get it, want it, and have capacity. Most of the time, we call it an accountability chart because it creates accountability. Most of the time, an org chart, an organizational chart, is the exact opposite. Think about even like recruiting. You're looking around and you're saying, all right, where's this person going to fit? Where are we going to put this guy on our team or this lady? And you're looking at your people first. The EOS approach is actually, it's kind of Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. You look forward 6 months, 12 months, a year in the future, whether it's an athletic corporation, an athletics, let's say it's a university or even a business, it doesn't matter. It's an organization,
Right.
a group of people. Where does this organization need to be in a year from now? And you work backwards and you say, okay, where are the different functions? Is there a visionary? Is there an integrator? Do we have a marketing and sales seat? Right? You're not looking at people, you're looking at the structure. So a big piece here is you're eliminating ego. You're taking out the people because you're focused on building the right structure. And once you define the seat has the function and the 5 roles, the 5 most important roles that this seat is accountable for. Why it's called an accountability chart. Then you can put the people in the right seat and test them. And the person might not even want to be in that seat. And now it's crystal clear. So all of that to say the accountability chart, it is imperative that you begin with the end in mind and you work your way backwards. And here's the beautiful thing, Ross. It's not one person creating this and then telling a bunch of people what to do. It is co-created because ideas are like little kids. Others are nice, but you like your own the best. Okay. And so that's a shout out to Keith Webb in his book, The Coach Model, which is one of the most fantastic books on how you can actually truly empower and help people by using a coach approach. But it's the whole concept of adult learning theory. Like we're adults, we like reading, we like learning, but in school we were told what to do, and it was kind of like, we have to do it. Now we get to do it. We are going to choose and ultimately do what we want to do. So why not tap into human psychology and say, okay, I know people are going to do what they want to do. So let me draw out through question what it is they want to do. So all of this to say the accountability chart is not created by one person. It's co-created with that leadership team. And what that does is it creates ownership, it creates autonomy, and it gives people an amazing opportunity to rise up to the expectations laid out before you, because the expectations are now crystal clear. Hey, Mr. Finance seat, right? These are the 5 most important things that you need to do. Do you get it? Do you want it? Do you have capacity to do it? And that's the ultimate test. Now, one other pro tip here, the GWC, you don't just need to go, yes, yes, yes. You actually can take a GWC and apply it to every single specific role. So
Right.
instead of just trying to get a,
The five
GWC, yes, yes,
accountable
yeah,
tasks.
you can actually go 3 times 5. You can get 15. If
Yeah.
they're 15 for 15, that's the right person in the right seat. Right person is core values, which we can dive into if you want. But we're talking
Yeah.
about the right seat. They
Right.
got to get 15 for 15. And I know that's ideal, but the goal is to say we're striving for excellence. We're striving for perfection, but what we're after is progress. That's what we're after.
Man. One of the things I wanted to ask you is you had a quote you mentioned offline that clarity comes through action, focus plus discipline equals execution. One of the things that I've noticed through sitting on different leaderships panels
Yeah.
in these EOS things, one of the common issues is, man, how do I get my team to be more accountable? And I
Mm,
kind of have to laugh after like hearing it several times. But
yeah.
as a fractional CMO, I've been probably in maybe a dozen EOS organizations, like in these
Yeah.
offsites. And I would have to say it's the most common thing. But the way that you just succinctly phrase it and the way you describe being a coach, right? Setting the example starts with the visionary and the integrator. It's like L plus M equals A
Yeah.
is the equation. It's not just, how do I do more L and M to get A? It's like, if you don't have if the math doesn't check out, you can't expect accountability. So how do you, going off of that quote, I want to say it again because I love it. Clarity comes through action. Focus plus discipline equals execution. Please unpack that and how can leaders become more accountable and get more accountability from the orgs?
Well, so let's take the quote and break it to the two concepts here. The first one is clarity comes through action. Many times people get stuck. We call it hitting the ceiling. And so even think about a time in your life where you've gotten stuck. Let's take the classic example. You got to write that paper for that class and you're just thinking about it and you're thinking about it and you're procrastinating. If you just start writing the paper, you will become more clear. Okay. If you don't know how to go out and sell your service, just start. And by taking action, you'll become more clear. So what we're looking at here is you need to overcome the fear of failure and look at failure is not the enemy, it is your teacher. And so by having micro adjustments, reflection, and reevaluation, you refine it and re-enter the process, you will get more clear by taking action. So there is a time for thinking, and there's also a time for go ahead and take that action. And what I'm proposing is you do both. Now, the second idea here is focus plus discipline equals execution. Let's break that down. It's very difficult to get focused, but once you do get focused, okay, it's even more difficult to stay focused. So you
Mm,
need focus, which is, we call those your 90-day priorities, your rocks. The 90-day world is really the context of that quote. What's so beautiful and powerful about the 90-day world is that you're creating focus for 90 days. This is where we need to focus as a company. And for you individually, Ross, like this is where you need to focus. Okay, well, how do you stay focused? You stay disciplined. You get and stay disciplined with your weekly level 10 meeting. If you don't have a personal scorecard, you're missing out on one of the most important benefits of EOS, which is the tool to get you energized. You wake up and you know exactly what you're supposed to do that day. Again, that scorecard probably ties into a little bit of those five roles that were defined for you on your seat. But the scorecard is a discipline. It is helps you stay disciplined. The level 10 meeting helps you stay disciplined. Having quarterly conversations, right? All of the tools of EOS come back to get focused, stay focused, and then you will be disciplined by getting and staying focused. And by doing that, you will actually level up your execution. So similar to you, like when I talk to these business leaders, it's always like, oh yeah, vision. I'm all about vision. But they forget the weakest and hardest part is the traction component, which is about focus and discipline. If you can tie those two together through rocks in the meeting pulse, having an extremely locked in, like I said earlier, let's bring it back to the sports analogy. The level 10 meeting is game day. You show up ready to go, early, locked in, a level of intensity and preparation. Everyone, you continue to do that week after week after week, you are creating higher execution. And so the 90-day world within that level 10 meeting, it's really a 90-minute world. You're creating that 90-minute world, right? And so that's what I love about it. But yeah, those quotes, man, I could talk on those quotes for hours. It really energizes me because I see weakness. I see weakness in execution, and it comes back to lack of focus.
but weakness is not it. I want to go into, you said something that was just, I'm staring at this book that was a Mark O'Donnell recommendation from Frank Betker, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
are you familiar with that book?
No, no, that sounds
Oh,
amazing though.
got to check it out. So one of
Okay.
the things that I want to share with you, Mark told me not long ago that he read this book and he was a baseball player and he had this scorecard that was every day hit 1,000 balls,
Mm,
right? Which is a pretty lofty daily activity, but he made his best attempt to do that. And
yeah.
he took his batting average from like maybe the high twos, low 300s to 670 the next
Wow.
year.
Yeah.
And but the idea of failure and weakness, I think that alone is like people are. like the most common fears people have are death or public speaking or just embarrassment,
Fear of
shame.
failure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
failure is a major fear. But
Yes.
like, enter the danger. If you don't fail, you will not succeed. It's impossible to succeed because that means you haven't tried nearly enough.
Yeah. Gosh. So it's making me think of there's a book called Inner Excellence,
Hmm.
and the author, amazing book. The author does a deep dive into a paradigm shift of failure. And again, looking at failure as that is the pathway to growth, right? Embracing and understanding failure and saying, okay, we all have weaknesses, so we need to acknowledge them and build a step into them. And again, it's the idea of the enter the danger. Are you open, honest, and willing to be vulnerable, willing to step into a situation where you're a little bit uncomfortable? That's where the growth happens. Think about any time in your life where you have dealt with adversity. Growth has been right around the corner, right? And so there's an opportunity for growing yourself out of the failure into success. But again, it's about the process. It's not about the outcome. The outcome takes care of itself. John Wooden is one of my favorite coaches,
Hmm.
and he's so focused on if we just have amazing practices, the games take care of themselves. Did you know that they never ever did film looking at the other team? They just didn't focus on the other team. They focused on getting really good at their bread and butter. He spent all this time teaching them how to pull their socks up and tie
Yeah.
their shoes correctly.
Yeah.
He was so detailed and he was focused on doing the little things right, right? And so I want to throw the quote up there, Luke 16:10. The Bible says, he who is faithful in a very little thing, faithful in much. And so it's ultimately about saying, for the greater good, how can I be faithful in the little things? And Ross, I know we're kind of talking about lots of things, but success to me is that word right there, faithfulness. How can you be faithful in doing the little things? And you know where those little things show up is on that scorecard. It's on that scorecard.
Yeah. Amen. So many other tracks I could go. I'm going to do my
I
best
know.
to stay
This is
disciplined
good.
and focused.
Yes.
Could talk to you for hours and hours, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is around failure. So I'm going to tell a quick story.
Yeah.
And I had a good friend and a peer, in one of my peer advisory groups, mentioned that an issue is a knee injury,
Mm,
right? As we get old, knee injuries, they may resurface and get worse with time. And I remember myself, you said, think about a time where I failed. So I through my athletic pursuits, I tore my ACL, my meniscus, MCL, PCL, like really blew out my knee in one training session, just being sloppy. And it was one of the craziest things because I couldn't really walk. You think about how important the knee joint is. You're hobbling around, jumping, using crutches. And I had a few people close to me reach out and says, "Don't get knee surgery." They were in the space of rehabilitation, physical therapy, that kind of thing.
yeah.
And I got really turned on to ATG program, Knees Over Toes guy on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But that person is a perfect example of taking a weakness into a strength, right? So he had both his knees completely blown, same degree as me, and now he can do a vertical of 40 plus inches just from
Yeah.
standing. But you lean into the weakness, right? You don't ignore it. You confront the reality, and you retain faith that you can fix it. And all that blood flow and all that, not listening to everybody else's opinion, and really having faith that they can figure it out, helped tons of people. So I turned my buddy on to this person to try and address the weakness. But really, the weakness is where your blood flows, the muscle grows. Where your attention goes, so does the grass grows. That was a little bit of a freestyle rap, but hey, it
There
worked.
we go.
The
Yeah.
question I have for you, Charlie, is I shared one of the failures that I had to overcome, one of the many, many, many. But what are some of the most important failures that turned into turning points and lessons in your career?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to chime into what you're saying. I too had a torn ACL, and here's my story on that. The failure was I rushed the rehab process. It was my freshman year going into my sophomore year. I rushed the rehab process and actually ended up re-tearing it. So my first 2 years of college, here I am, a college football player. I was a starter as a freshman. It was like great. I was doing so good. And then that spring, tear my ACL, come back stronger, better, faster, everything, right? Locked in. 6 months to the T, tore it again. and it was like, 8 or 9 months the second time around. What that forced me to do was completely pivot into focusing on, okay, where is God leading me in this life? Right? I had no idea what I wanted to do. And
Right.
it led me into who has had the most impact in my life? Coaches. How can I take that and have a positive impact in other people's lives and through being a coach? And so it's so funny because, long story short, getting into strength and conditioning, I didn't want to get into the rehab side. I
Right.
wanted to get into the injury prevention side. And you
Yep.
really can't prevent it, you can reduce the risk of it. So it's like two sides of the same
Hmm.
coin. And so by getting into that, that was always a stepping stone to have a greater impact, helping these leaders of leaders learn how to develop themselves and be empowered. So that was one of the hardest failures and struggles I've ever gone through. I mean, it essentially was 3 years total of just constantly being in the athletic training room. But I developed some of the best relationships with some of these other hurt athletes, modeling what it looks like to be resilient. And I truly believe that that resilience and perseverance that God was using in my life helped prepare me for a 10-year career path in strength and conditioning, and then transitioning into the one-on-one executive coaching. And now going through my own trials, being a young father and trying to make it as an EOS implementer and continuing to just build off of that, right? So it's funny when you look back and you see failures or hardships, really what those are is you can use those as foundational building block to propel you to deeper growth and to ultimately sharpening and shaping your faith in the one who ultimately is sovereign. And he's been doing it to draw you closer to himself.
I,
So
I love something
yeah,
that you said. I want to highlight it. It's you
yes, go
can't
ahead.
prevent injuries from happening, but you can reduce the likelihood that they will. Same
Yep,
thing in business. You can't prevent mistakes from
it's right.
happening, but you can prevent the frequency, the likelihood that the mistakes do happen, right? The goal is
Mm,
not perfect. The goal is growth, right? We
yeah,
weren't put on this earth to be the perfect person. There was only one that was the perfect person. They set the
yeah.
example. The goal was to get better and try to be and be, sanctification, right? Like every day improve. So
Yeah.
I love, man, I never thought of that in terms of sports injuries and
Oh, there's
training,
the
but it's
correlation is there,
just
right?
so there.
But it's the same with like a company that's running on EOS. It's not that they're perfect. They can't prevent, there's all these outside sources, right? They're going to help happen. The tariffs that are going on right now, like all the political stuff, there's all this stuff that's happening. But what you can control, focus on what you can control, is you can be really aligned as a leadership team, as a visionary integrator. If you're listening to this, you can have your same page meetings consistently. You can have a really good level 10 meeting. Each of your department quarterlies can be locked in. And what that does is create that tightness, again, going back to those three words of focus, discipline, and execution, so that when, it's not if, when the adversity, when the injuries happen to the business, you are able to adapt and adjust quicker. Right. There was a great study by, I think it was Harvard Business Review, and it used to talk about the number one key to success was it's all about resilience, grit, right? There's a whole this theme about grit.
Sure.
And what
Yep.
they actually have started to switch to is it's not really grit, it's more the ability to adapt and adjust. It's the
Right.
ability to be flexible because the world that
Adaptability.
we live in, you got to be adaptable. And so being able to adapt, EOS gives you a business operating system, a team, and ultimately a leadership coach to be able to help you adapt and adjust quicker so that when adversity hits, you're able to take that step. You're able to see faster and see further.
I want to, I have to call to attention your acronym for your core values, fight. Um, how did you come up with that? And like, what does it mean to you to fight as a core value?
Yeah. So for those listening, my acronym is FIGHT. So F is faithful, I is being intentional, G is being gentle, H is being humble, and T is thankful. And really, I've created a life plan. It's essentially the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, but I've tailored it to myself. And so the first thing is those core values. And so from doing deep work myself and having coaches and mentors all throughout my 20s, I just continued to refine and update what are my life values, right? So thinking about when I was in my early 20s, single, when I have a family one day, what is it I want to stand for? Who's the man that I am and who's the man I want to become? And basically, what are the things I'm most passionate about? And so eventually it narrowed it down to those five. and changed some of the wording on some of them and basically wanted it to to fit an easy acronym. And I love the idea of fight because it's about we're here ultimately. Again, I'll go back to my purpose here is to love God and to love people, right? To help others live fully and love deeply. And if I'm doing that, my deepest desire, let me know if this resonates with you, is to hear that well done, good and faithful servant, right? And faithfulness comes from the faithful creator. It's coming from him. So that's why I want to be faithful as a husband, as a father, as a leader. I want to be intentional as a husband, as a father, as a leader. I want to be gentle, to be patient, emotionally intelligent, to be present, right? To be humble, thinking of others as more important than yourselves, and then being thankful. This life is way too short. We don't know. You may not be here tomorrow. If you live today like you were not going to live if you're going to be gone tomorrow, how would that impact you? You would be so generous. You'd be so thankful. You'd be focused on the things that matter most, Ross, which is relationships. It's relationships. That's what matters most. That's why we're here. That's why we're having a conversation. We're in relation. We're in relationship with others, our clients, our families, our friends, people that are in our communities. We're here to ultimately try and be a blessing. And remember, we've been blessed. So now we can turn around and be a blessing. So if you don't have personal core values, I encourage you take the time to do it because what it does, it's a compass. When I need to make a decision, does it fit my core values? My core values align very similar to the EOS core values. So when I was thinking about becoming a franchise owner and joining the EOS worldwide team, my core values were very similar. A lot of them fit into it and they were impressed. Hey, you already have your core values. So it comes back to if you want to make a better decision, have a really clear vision and really clear values. It's like that North Star, it's your compass. So yeah, man, that's my insight on core values.
I'm fired up. Love it. I
Yeah.
also I couldn't agree more. I feel like the core values, if you don't have them for yourself, it's going to be hard to get them solidified for the organization, right? If you're sitting in a
Yes.
leadership team. So it
Yeah.
starts with you. Now, we're approaching one of my favorite parts of the show, which is the leave a question, ask a question. And I'll
Okay.
start with the question that the prior guest had for you, not knowing it was you. That question is, if you were to be standing at your own funeral, what would people say about you?
Hmm. What I would hope that they would say is that Charlie lived this life in such a way where he glorified God with the relational impact that he had and how he cared about himself as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as a servant, and ultimately as a follower of Christ. I think that's what I would want is if I could only focus in on that one core value, it would Charlie was faithful in what God had given him in those five different seats, those five different hats of being a follower, being a husband, being a father, being a leader, and being a servant. He was faithful in those things. So yeah, that's a powerful, powerful question. Whoever said that, thank you. Got my mind going.
You know what? I think you know who said that. Oh no, actually, no, it's somebody else. Okay. I'll introduce you to the person who said that because I think you two would hit it off if you don't
Yeah,
already know them. What question do you have for the next guest without knowing who they are?
here we go. So if you could go back and talk to yourself when you first started your career, whatever the career that you're doing right now. So you think year one, what would be a personal piece of advice that you would give to that younger version and a professional piece of advice? So I'm sneaking in two questions. Personal and professional piece of advice to talk to your younger self in that first year of being whatever it is you're doing now. What advice would you give to yourself? That's my question.
I love that question. I ask a similar question, which is if you could have a conversation with your 8-year-old self, what would you tell them?
Yeah,
But that's more specific and more, it's more focused. How's
yeah.
that?
I want that year one, like in your first year of your career, knowing what you know now, what could you go back and tell yourself?
Very cool.
Awesome.
Well, Charlie, I really appreciate the conversation. It got me fired up here around lunchtime on the East Coast. And everyone else listening, I appreciate you listening. I don't run ads in the show, don't plan to. The only way that the show grows is if you share it with a friend. That's, give the gift keeps on giving. Charlie, thank you. Everyone else, be well.
Thanks, Ross. Be blessed.